He was gone for hours, lost in the jungle, and when he returned, he wasn't the same. It was supposed to be a fun, adventurous trip, a simple, overnight camping excursion for a group of students on our school's annual jungle trek. We were a class of 15, set out to hike through dense jungle trails, sleep under the stars, and return the next day with stories to tell. But by the end of it, we didn't just have stories. Some of us had nightmares. It all started on the second night, after we'd already set up camp near a small creek. The air was thick with humidity, and the sounds of the jungle chirping insects, distant howls, and the rustling of leaves became an almost constant soundtrack to our lives for the next 24 hours. We'd eaten, laughed, and played cards around the campfire. That wasn't the wind or an animal, but something deliberate, something human. The way he was walking, the way he spoke it, was as though he wasn't the same person. His movements were stiff, his eyes unblinking. The way he looked at us, like he was studying us, as if he didn't recognize us at all. The teachers had already started organizing a search party, and there was confusion and concern in the air. No one ever spoke of it again. But when they saw Kyle, they didn't ask any questions. They didn't need to. They knew something was off, too. Not the Kyle I knew, but something else. Something that wore his skin. We couldn't. The air felt wrong. The jungle felt wrong. It was as if something had shifted, as if the world around us had changed the moment Kyle had disappeared. We noticed that Kyle, one of our quieter classmates, had started to fall behind. "Hey, Kyle," I called, looking back down the trail. No response. Maybe he'd wandered off and got turned around. Maybe he'd been scared and confused. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the Kyle who had returned wasn't the same person who had disappeared. It wasn't like Kyle to wander off. We were all well aware of the dangers the jungle presented. We stopped, scanning the path. "Where'd he go?" Emily asked. Calling Kyle's name louder this time. Minutes passed, then an hour. We tried to stay calm, knowing that panicking wouldn't help. That's when we heard it. A rustling, faint at first, but unmistakably, sound of movement through the underbrush. We kept calling, but there was still no answer. By now, we were all on edge. The moon had risen higher in the sky, casting a ghostly light through the trees. "Kyle." I turned sharply toward the sound, my heart skipping a beat. It wasn't Kyle. The voice was deep, distorted, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "Kyle, is that you?" Emily asked nervously, her voice trembling. There was no response, only silence. We decided to head back to camp and get help. We didn't have any other choice. And then, just like that, Kyle stepped into view. At first, we thought we'd finally found him. But as I saw him approach, a cold chill ran down my spine. "Kyle." As though he wasn't really present. We all stood there, frozen, unable to look away. "Come on," Kyle said again, but this time, his tone was almost, something was wrong. Something was deeply wrong. And it wasn't just the fact that he had vanished without a trace for hours. It was him, and his smile, there was no warmth in it. We walked with him, but none of us spoke. When we finally made it back to camp, the others were waiting, looking anxious, but they didn't say anything. No one did. That night, as we sat by the fire, I tried to convince myself that Kyle was just shaken up. The way he moved, the way he spoke. The next morning, Kyle was gone again. He hadn't left the camp. His things were still there, untouched, but Kyle himself had vanished once more. We never saw him again. But sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I can still see his face, those empty eyes staring at me from the dark, and I know he's still out there, somewhere. There were eyes watching us from the darkness, glowing, unblinking eyes, and one by one, they took us. It was supposed to be an exciting camping trip, a weekend hike through the jungle with a group of classmates. The kind of thing you hear about in stories, an adventure far from the city and its distractions. We were high school seniors, all tough and eager to prove we could handle the wild. The air was dense, humid, and heavy, with the earthy smell of wet leaves. The sun was setting, casting the forest in long shadows as we gathered around the fire. The crackling warmth, the only light in a growing sea of darkness. The plan was simple: hike to a remote part of the jungle, set up camp, and survive a weekend disconnected from everything. We were sitting close to the fire, talking and laughing, but the air felt different. Oh, come on, it's just a jungle. What could go wrong? It felt thick, almost suffocating, like something was pressing down on us from above, and pretending like the jungle wasn't alive with something that seemed to be waiting. The trees loomed like dark giants, their branches tangled together, and every now and then a faint sound would drift through the air, rustling, or a branch snapping somewhere deep in the jungle. I glanced into the darkness between the trees, and for a split second I saw what I thought were two faint glimmers of light, like the reflection of the fire in a pair of eyes. But when we turned to look, the jungle was silent again. But then, a few minutes later, I saw it again, this time more distinct. Two small points of light, glowing faintly, hovering just outside the reach of the fire. They didn't move, didn't blink, they just stared at us from the dark. I should have known something was off from the start. Still, there was something unsettling about the stillness of it all, the way the forest seemed to be holding its breath. We set up camp deep within the jungle, surrounded by towering trees and thick foliage that muffled even the smallest sounds. There was nothing but the inky blackness of the jungle. "Let's hike around the perimeter of the camp, see what we can find," she said. The jungle seemed to breathe a little heavier now, the silence pressing down on us like a weight. My eyes darted back to the trees. I felt it again, the unmistakable sensation that we weren't alone. But Lily, who was already feeling the weight of the place, disagreed. It was like something was moving through the underbrush fast, too fast for an animal. Something was out there. "There it is again," she shouted, but I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. The shadows seemed deeper now, stretching toward us. Candles in the night. We never went back into that part of the jungle. We were breathless, terrified, and covered in dirt. We weren't alone. And those eyes, the eyes that watched us from the dark, are still out there, waiting. When we told them what happened, they searched the area, but Rachel was never found. One by one, those eyes will come for us all. And next time, I don't think we'll be lucky enough to escape. There was no trace of her, no footprints, no sign of struggle, nothing. They were getting closer, moving toward us with an unsettling, deliberate slowness. The jungle had gone eerily silent again. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. It was as though they were getting closer, moving through the trees toward us. We ran, sprinting through the jungle, heartbeats pounding in our ears, the eyes following us every step of the way. Rachel, who was always the brave one, kept suggesting we go exploring after dark. I wasn't sure what to think, but before I could respond, Jack laughed it off. his typical response when things felt awkward. And so, against the growing feeling of unease that clung to me, we stayed by the fire, talking, laughing. The first thing that unsettled me was the eyes. At first, I thought it was just the firelight playing tricks. I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure if I had imagined it. "Hey, did you guys see that?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Rachel was the first to turn her head, following my gaze. "What? Where?" "There," I said, pointing toward the trees. "Right there." The rest of the group turned to look, but by the time they did, the eyes were gone. "I don't see anything," Noah said, frowning. "You're just spooked. It's probably an animal." But the air had changed. I tried to shake it off. The others were laughing, joking about wild animals and the dark. It wasn't long before someone else noticed them too. Lily was the next to spot the glowing eyes. She stood up abruptly, pointing toward the same spot in the dark. The group went silent. This time, the eyes were unmistakable, clearer, brighter. "That's not normal," Jack muttered, his voice suddenly serious. "We need to be careful." I could hear the nervousness in his voice now, something I hadn't expected. Jack was never afraid of anything. "We should move," Lily said, her voice low and panicked. "This is wrong. We're not alone." But before we could act, there was a rustling in the bushes, followed by a sharp, chilling screech. The eyes blinked, then disappeared. It was like the jungle itself was holding its breath, waiting. Suddenly, Rachel screamed. The rest of us turned, but Rachel was gone. "Rachel," Lily called out, her voice shaking. "Rachel." We all stood up, frantically scanning the area around the camp. Panic set in. And then just like that, the eyes appeared again. Only this time, they were everywhere. I don't remember how we got to our feet, but I remember the panic that spread like wildfire. We didn't stop until we reached the clearing near the creek, where the teachers had set up a second camp. We never spoke of what happened that night again,